My employee used his software code in our company. Who owns the code now? This has become an issue. A number of companies have had employees use their own code in some company software. And what I mean by the employee's own code is it may have been written by the employee prior to coming into the company. So who owns the code now? Did the employee freely give it to the company and now the company owns it? Or does the employee still own it, and can the employee tell the company, you have to stop using my code if the employee is no longer at the company? Here's how this works. By the way, it's a copyright analysis, so this is all under copyright law. When the employee first wrote the code, the employee acquired copyright ownership in the code. So the employee has intellectual property rights, the right of ownership of the code. Unless the employee transfers that ownership, the employee keeps it. So let's say the employee uses the code in the company's software. That use is called a license. So the employee is allowing the company to use the code. That's called a copyright license. License just means permission to use. So now the company has a right to use it, but it doesn't mean the company owns the code. Let's say the employee gets fired, and now the employee says, hey, by the way, you have to stop using my code, which is somewhere in the company's software. Does the company have to? Well, first off, the company doesn't own the code. The employee owned it because the employee created that code before joining the company. So the copyright is owned by the employee. But the employee allowed the company to use it. It's called an implied license. By putting the code in the company's software, the employee was performing acts that imply the employee was authorizing use of the code. So the company has a license to use it, but for how long? That is now a difficult issue, because the employee is going to say the company only has a right to use the code as long as the employee is working in the company. The company is going to say we have a right to perpetually use this code because the employee was hired to make the software work. We didn't even know the employee used this code, or maybe they did, but either way, the employee was fulfilling job responsibilities by making the code work. It would be sabotage to allow the employee to pull that code out now, leaving the company's software disabled. Ultimately, I think the company would be likely to prevail if this went to court. In other words, I think a judge would be likely to say the employee does not have a right to withdraw the license for the copyright just because the employee got fired. It'd be a different story if the employee had in writing that the company can use the code as long as the employee is working there. That's a different scenario. But if it was never discussed, I believe a court is likely to conclude that the employee authorized ongoing use of the code by putting it in the company's software, and the employee does not have a right to stop the company from using that code now that the employee is terminated. As you can see, this is messy, and all parties would be better off if they had something in writing. And so whenever an employee is using their own code or phone or computer or laptop or creative work or data, anything that the employee is using that's personal, it makes sense to sit and think about, should we have an agreement in place about what happens when the employee is no longer here? For example, if the employee is using her phone and she leaves, what happens to the company's code, email, or data on that phone? I'm Aaron Hall, an attorney for business owners and entrepreneurial companies. You can learn more about me at aaronhall.com, and if you'd like to sign up for our free resources, go to aaronhall.com/free.